Hi everyone, this is Counseling 4480, Zunker, Chapter 3, Career Counseling Models. So in the previous chapter, we talked a little bit about the concepts, and now we're going to see how they can be applied through models. Some issues and concepts emerging from model development: trait and factor approach. Most attention, most popular of contemporary models is the trait and factor approach. Trait orientation is characterized as objective data, so they're valid standardized test scores, which basically means that these assessments are ones that have been tested out to make sure that they are accurately reporting the things that they say they're reporting. That's what validity or valid means. Not subjective. Information clients reveal about themselves and perceptions of the environment. So not subjective basically means that it is factual. Subjective means that it's someone's opinion or point of view. Like in an interview, like how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Which is why trait and factor is so popular, is because it's actually using assessments, which is what the previous one said about objective data, is that it's about testing and seeing exactly what is being presented and then using that instead of someone's just opinion or point of view. Diagnosis is also known as a problem identification. When you get diagnosed, that's trying to figure out what's going on with you. A differential diagnosis based on individual psychology, how individuals differ from the norms. So when you take a test of something, usually they test a lot of people and then they establish something like a bell curve. I'm sure you've heard of that before. Something that has a standard, a middle area, that's considered the norm or the normal area. So with differential diagnosis, we want to make sure that, we want to see how far away from the norm you are testing or scoring. So you would also end up using words like undecided or indecisive when it becomes a description for what's going on. Try to understand why the client has problems. It could be irrational beliefs. Irrational beliefs are things that maybe they were taught growing up that are actually not really true. Like maybe the parents said that that child was dumb or stupid or not useful at all, which is something that you might carry on for a long time or maybe even for the rest of your life. There's anxiety, and then also people who can't make decisions because they lack the information. So 3 types of labels when it comes to this, which is decided, undecided, and indecisive, which is what we're going to explore next. Decided clients are those who have made a career decision. Undecided clients have not made a career decision, but might not view their current status as a problem. Prefer to delay making commitments. So they're undecided, but they're not necessarily very stressed out about it. Maybe because they already have a job, so they're not really that worried about getting another job per se. Okay, or they just don't want to make a decision right now. Characteristics that are describing undecided clients would be uninformed. They might be immature. They might lack self-knowledge, or they might lack information about occupations, and this is why they're a little hesitant. Also described as multi-potential individuals. That means that they have the competencies to pursue several different types of careers. And I told you guys about this in class before. Sometimes when you take an interest inventory, maybe you don't have one specific area like science or athletics or musical or whatever, but instead you are kind of everywhere. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. It could be that, you're undecided, or you really are able to do a lot of different things. So it really depends on how you see that person when you meet them and talk to them, which one it could be. Indecisive clients is one who has a high level of anxiety with dysfunctional thinking. Okay, do you see the difference between that and undecided? Not having cognitive clarity, irrational beliefs, lack of self-confidence, lacks tolerance of ambiguity, which basically means that they can't really feel okay when things don't have an answer. Okay, when I say, well, we don't know, we'll see what happens, the person's like, what do you mean that? I need to know exactly what's going to happen next. That would be someone who cannot be comfortable with ambiguity. Lacks a sense of identity as well. So in this chapter, we talk about 5 career counseling models. We focus on these 5. They're the trait and factor and person environment fit, or PEF, developmental, learning theory, cognitive information processing, or SIP approach, and multicultural career counseling model for ethnic women. And the reason why we do that is because the other 4 don't really talk about ethnicity or multiculturalism. Okay, so for model one, trait and factor and person environment fit, PEF converge. Let's talk about how they converge together because of, how old the trait and factor idea is, the concept is. Trait and factor viewed by some as promoting a very simplistic counseling process. People joke around and call it the 3 interviews and a cloud of dust. Basically imagining like someone coming in 3 times, taking assessments, and then they're gone. Poof. Right, and that's what the cloud of dust is. And so people want to address that issue. Started to seem counselor dominated, inflexible, simplistic, and task oriented, which basically means that the counselor is seen as someone who's just telling people what to do as opposed to really working collaboratively. However, trait and factor can be effectively put into practice. Again, it's an old concept or theory, but it's still popular today. So how do we keep it valid and popular even though people might have some doubt about it? The PEF adapted trait and factor, which is like the modernized version of it, or the contemporary version of it. Both cognitive and affective processes are now involved. So now we're talking about thinking and then also the feeling part. Clinical information and qualitative data are included in the appraisal process. So before we talked a lot about those valid tests. Now we're talking about qualitative data. Qualitative data goes along with quantitative data. Quantitative would be the more trustworthy one that people tend to think is more accurate because it has a lot of numbers in it, statistics. When it comes to qualitative data, that's the data that you get when you interview someone or you talk to someone. Okay, you can also quantify that as well and make statistics out of qualitative data, but it's just the opposite, or not the the opposite, but it's still effective. Okay, the counselor's role has shifted from a directive approach to a collaborative one. Job satisfaction is a significant variable in determining productivity and career tenure. So now we really want to make sure that you're happy with your job because that will show that you're going to be a hard worker, but then also that you want to work there for a very long time, which is what career tenure is all about. Measured abilities, interests, and values can facilitate the match to a work environment. Again, using assessments to see how the assessment is and how you are and see if they match up. Achievement needs to be satisfied in one's work environment. Client problems are the result of lack of fit between the individual and the work environment. So again, when there is a problem at work, in this concept or in this theory and model, it is saying that the environment and the person are not matching up. Counselors focus on the individuality of their clients. So as a counselor, you're going to want to look at their abilities, needs, values, and interests. Okay, so for them, a counseling timeline would be an intake interview, then an identify developmental variables, assessment, identify and solve problems, generate the PEF analysis, confirm, explore, and decide, and then follow up. Okay. Major goals in PEF is the enhancement of self-knowledge. So this is one part of that timeline that we just reviewed that stands out in this model. Okay, it is to better equip to access, self-access potential satisfaction and congruence with work environments. Emphasize fit a person with an optimal career. Standard assessment instruments are used to determine the client's abilities, values, and interests. Subjective data, which is a qualitative data we were talking about before, cognitive clarity, emotional status evaluation, and problem-solving processes are used with assessment data in the counseling process. And then identifying of information processing skills. So what we were talking about before, generating a PEF analysis, this is actually the chart that you see here, or the flow chart, and then a description. First, the client is administered an abilities test and a value questionnaire. Then the abilities and value patterns of occupation are compared with the client's. 3, predict satisfactoriness based on the person's abilities and values of the work environment requirements and reinforcers. So are they getting paid enough? Are they feeling good because people are recognizing them? Do they have pride? Depending on what kind of reinforcement this person desires. 4, person selects selective occupations of interest and researches each one until an optimal choice is made. The PEF analysis stress careers choice should be based on one's fit with the work requirements and feeling of well-being. Okay. All right. In the book, and I will emphasize this several times, you do need to read the book. And if this model doesn't really make sense Reading the case study for each one is really, really helpful. I don't want to cover it all in this lecture because then it'll take too long, but I will kind of give you a little intro to each of the sections, okay? So case 3.1, the undecided college student. This is the beginning section of it, okay? This is a counselor summary of the case of a 19-year-old female who was undecided about a career goal. Lee presented a background from a stable home environment, and there are no indications of irrational thinking or faulty beliefs. She appears to be stable and express a positive self-concept. There was no evidence that she felt she must limit her career options because she's a female. She felt free to explore any career of interest and was fully aware that some careers are stereotyped as male and female. Lee mentioned that her mother was a Chinese American born in this country and that her father was also American of Irish and German descent. She is identified with the dominant society. She finished high school at the top 20% and was in her first semester of college. She was found to have a very high level of skills in information processing. The counselor concluded that Lee was now serious about making a career decision. During the assessment stage, Lee and the counselor collaborated on the tests that could be helpful. Okay, so that's kind of the intro, and then it gives you a dialogue between the two, and then also assessments. Part of the script that I thought was really important that I want you to review in the book would be, first, we will measure your abilities and values. Second, we will both assess work environments by not only observing work requirements, but also by whether you feel a particular occupation would be satisfying to you. We will do this by matching your traits with your work reinforcers found in work environments. When we find a match, we refer to this as a PEF or PEF. So this will show you kind of what kind of personality would be best suited for a trait and factor and PEF type of model. Okay. All right, let's move along to model number 2, which is the development model. Career development is a lifelong process. Career needs of each person must be met during all stages of life. Goals, learning strategies, and timing of interventions in this model are guided by SUPER's vocational developmental tasks and stages. Counselors focus on barriers that may stop one's development of career maturity and self-concept. Remember in chapter 2 we talked about the developments. There's different milestones in a person's life. So people might actually change in what they want to do depending on how old they are, what part of life they are at the moment. Career development is a lifelong process. People change during developmental stages as they adapt to changing life roles. There are 5 life stages. There's growth, exploration, establishment, maintenance, and disengagement. Readiness, or what is also known as career maturity, is essential for optimal career decision making. So you need to be ready to work to be able to start finding work. That's what it's saying. Counselors focus on developmental tasks as key points for appropriate interventions. Unique individuals' needs are most important as guidelines for establishing counseling goals. Clients must be prepared to project self into the work world so you can see a realistic self-concept, which is very, very important. What happens in one's life roles affects other life roles. So if you're unhappy, let's say at work, you might be also unhappy at home. And not because you're unhappy with your family, but just because it carries over and affects it. Clients do not restrict career alternatives. Now, we're talking about counseling timeline for this model, model number 2. It goes from intake interview, career development assessment and counseling, data integration and narrative interpretation, establishment of counseling goals, and counseling procedures and process. So these are the timeline, and in the book it actually goes through each section and describes it. I'm just going to choose what I think stands out, but I'm expecting you guys to read through and understand the different parts of it as a counselor, because you need to know what happens at the beginning and what happens at the end. All right, the part that I really want to focus on is the CDAC 4 steps. So that one is, number 1, client social development and role salience are assessed. That is, education, work, family, community, and leisure are explored to see how you see yourself in those areas. 2, evaluation of the client's perception of the work role, career status in terms of growth, exploration, establishment, maintenance, and disengagement. Client's adaptability and perception of current job market trends. So we want to see how well you really understand what's going on when it comes to work in the labor market itself. 3. Measure of abilities, interests, and values. You can use Holland's Ryesex type assessment. We talked about that before in the second chapter. And connections to work. 4. Self-concepts and life themes, subjective evaluation of the client's view of self and dominant lifestyles, and life themes through conversations and autobiography. So remember when we asked you guys to do an assignment where you write down all the types of work that you've done? That's what we're going to use as the subjective part, the self-concept and life themes. That's part of one, and then the other thing is doing an interview or whatever it may be that is more subjective or qualitative based. All right. In this section, case 3.2, the case of job loss and family concerns, I really wanted to also introduce you to that person as well so you can understand them. Okay, so Larry, a 26-year-old Caucasian male, has been married for 6 years and has fathered 2 children ages 2 and 4. He is currently a construction carpenter specializing in framing buildings. He and his wife both have a high school diploma or education. The counselor was impressed with Larry's ability to express himself. He appeared to be very happy with his marriage and, as he put it, I married my high school sweetheart. His wife is employed as a bank teller. His parents are in their mid-60s, and his father is a licensed electrician. He has 3 siblings. His parents have been both very supportive and encouraged Larry to work hard to support his family. Larry grew up in a small town near a large city. He has commuted to different job sites in the nearby city. Currently, there has been a downturn in the construction industry because of severe recession. Many of his fellow workers have not been able to find work, and he is very concerned about being laid off, and in addition is worried that his wife may also lose her job. As Larry put it, we may lose everything we have worked for, including our home. Somehow I will need to find other work to support my family. So that's kind of an intro to case 3.2. This model is designed to help clients develop and accept an integrated and adequate picture of themselves in their life roles. So they're talking about a father figure here, right? Also a husband. Test the concept against reality, what's going on. Maybe the recession is going to play a big role. And convert it into reality by making choices that implement the self concept and lead to job success and satisfaction as well as benefit society. The script for this one might be something like this. This is a little bit more of a description. His first phase of testing would be the counselor emphasized the importance of work role and its relationship to other roles, so being a father and stuff like that. Anger and unhappiness resulting from work dissatisfaction can spill over to family life, evaluating commitment and connection to future goals. The second phase might be the assessment phase. Measure one's career concerns and how they are related to career development tasks. A lack of occupational information may be related to a lack of exploration skills needed to process career information. So what this part is, if you don't know that there's tons of different types of jobs out there, you're not going to be able to consider them, right? So you need to know how to explore so that you're aware of all the other job possibilities that you might have in front of you. Third phase is interest, values, and abilities are measured to understand the kind of work one is interested in. So that's a typical assessments we were talking about before. Fourth is discussion will focus on how one currently views oneself and the world around the person. We will put all this data together and come up with some goals and plans for the future. And so that's very similar to the assignment number 2, project B that you're doing is, we're trying to get you to synthesize all these different types of assessments and interviews and see what you make of it. All right, now we're talking about model number 3, a learning theory of career counseling, LTCC. Each individual's unique learning experiences over the lifespan are most influential in the career choice process. Learning is a key ingredient in career counseling and career guidance. Counselors' major task is to enhance learning opportunities for clients by using a wide array of effective models that begin in childhood and endure throughout a lifetime. So, counselor provides the environment for clients to develop interests, skills, values, work habits, and other personal qualities. Okay, learning theory. You got to remember that's part of the title here. Okay. Clients can be empowered to take action that promotes the creation of satisfying lives now and in the future. The client is seen as one who is exploring and experimenting with possibilities and tentative decisions. So basically it means we're still thinking about maybe doing these types of things after we've thought about it. Okay, so you're learning about things and then now trying to figure out how to make a decision. Indecision should not be viewed as negative diagnosis, but as someone who's who is open to learning and exploring. Okay, so just because you're like, I don't know which one yet, doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a lazy person. It just means maybe you're getting ready to start to explore and maybe take some risks. Okay. Assessment instruments are used to simulate new learning by identifying needed new skills, cultivating new interests, and developing interpersonal competencies. So by taking these assessments, you'll learn a little bit about you. You might see areas where you're like, you know what, I think I want to try these things out or improve these certain things that I didn't score so high or score to what my expectations were. Educational interventions should be increased to provide more opportunities of learning to meet career demands, demands of the workplace, changing work habits, changing beliefs and values. Success criteria should be based on learning outcomes and not only on a client making a career decision. Counselors should integrate career and personal counseling together. So this is something that, as we noticed before, our lives are all meshed together, different components. We try to, separate them a little bit, just to make sure that we know which one is our leisure time, which one's our personal time with the family, let's say, and then work time and school time. But they do all sometimes converge together. Okay. All right, the counseling timeline for this model is interview, assessment. The most direct influences on decision making are one's accumulated knowledge about the world and about oneself, one's entire set of desired and undesired outcomes, evaluative thought processes that determine what one can or should try to accomplish right now, and thought processes that determine strategies for how to accomplish current objectives and coordinate action. Using learning intervention strategies to develop skills, interests, and abilities to expand on current or client's outcome potential is a unique feature of this model. So again, we're talking about learning, right? And how we can facilitate exploration through the learning part. Again, you cannot make decisions if you don't know what all the options are, right? All right, for case study number 3.3, the case of a reluctant decision maker. So I'll read you the description and then I'll read the script part that I thought stood out. Okay, Joe was accompanied by a community counseling center by a friend who was also a career counseling client. Joe needed a great deal of support and encouragement because he agreed to make an appointment. He reluctantly asked for help to find a better job. Joe dropped out of high school when he was in the 10th grade to work in a fast food establishment. He recently completed a high school equivalency course and received a diploma. Now, 22, he continues to live with his parents. His father is a factory worker, his mother's a homemaker, and he has 4 siblings. The counselor immediately recognized that Joe was very uncomfortable asking for help. He appeared to be very nervous and restless. The counselor attempted to help Joe feel more comfortable. So that was kind of the bio, or that is the bio. So now we're talking about the script. One of the first things the counselor should say is, Joe, I'm pleased to know you. Maybe give him a handshake. Your buddy here has been telling me about what a nice guy you are and what a good friend you have been. And then the rest of the case study tells you a little bit about how to properly communicate or potentially a scenario of how to communicate with a person who might be like this. Okay. Model number 4, Cognitive Information Processing, SIP model. This is an extension of the career development theory, cognitive information processing approach to career problem solving and decision making. So for this one, there's a hierarchical system. So think of it as a pyramid or a triangle. The base of it is the knowledge domains, also known as the occupational knowledge. So what you know about work, and then also what you know about yourself or self-knowledge. Okay, and then the second level would be the decision skills domain, which is the CASVE model that we talked about in chapter 2. An executive processing domain, which is the top one, solutions are accomplished by formulating strategies. So these are called metacognitions. So meta just means like all the things that you know are now put together to synthesize, to be able to understand. Okay, and then this would be skills of initiating, which means being able to start looking for something or start doing something. Coordinating, so showing some structure to it, understanding what needs to go when, like prioritizing. Storing and retrieving information. So you can see how those levels build upon each other. So the pyramid of information processing domains, this is the illustration of what the previous slide was all about. Take a time, feel free to look at this and try to understand it. It's not too difficult. All right, career choice should be approached as a problem-solving activity. Information processing is key in career exploration. So you need to be able to process the information that you're being given by the counselor if you are the client. Okay? Self-knowledge and occupational knowledge are essential elements in the career choice process. If you don't know what's around you, possibility for job-wise, you're not going to be able to really make the wisest or the best decision. And also, if you don't know who you are, that's always why we emphasize in counseling and psychology. You need to reflect and think about who you are. You might not have all the answers yet, but you should be secure in about who you are as a person. Okay? You might have some times where you make, decisions that you're like, oh, that wasn't so smart. But overall, you still feel comfortable with your body. Okay? All right. Information is key skill in career exploration. Self-knowledge and occupational knowledge are essential elements in the career choice process, and career information processing is a learning event. Learning plans provide a sequence of activities that are planned by counselor and client. So for this model, the counseling timeline involves initial interview, preliminary assessment, define the problem and analyze causes, formulate goals, develop an individual learning plan, ILP, execute individual learning plans, and summative review and generalization. So attempt to answer some important questions about problem solving and the career making process. In the individual learning plan, which is what we were stressing through the timeline, are goals, priorities, activities, and outcome list. And in your book, there should be an example of what one looks like. It is on page 105. All right, so now in case 3.4, there is a case of a lot of bravado. So let me introduce you to the scenario. Okay, the case was recorded by a counselor in the first person. Excerpts from the case are used as examples of one of the important stages in the SIP model. Okay. When Pat walked into the counseling center, he impressed the secretary as someone who has to be very important. Pat had a swagger in his walk that gave the impression of one who is most confident, considers himself attractive, and has got the world by the tail. He didn't ask for the counselor. He wanted to see the director of the person who was in charge. The secretary did not question Pat's motives, but meekly showed him the way to my office. He quickly made his entry and almost cracked my knuckles while shaking hands. I'm sure they could hear him clearly in the adjoining rooms as his first comments went something like this. Howdy, my name is Pat. I came to see you today for a little help. As Pat and I got to know more about each other during our early conversations, he stated that he wanted help in picking out a good job and agreed to proceed with career counseling as it was outlined. Pat grew up on a ranch in the West Texas that his father managed for a wealthy oil man. In the area where Pat grew up, there were extremely large ranches, and many of them contained significant oil and gas deposits. As Pat put it, the people there were friendly and down home. Pat felt his parents were very supportive of him, and it was understood that he would attend college. He had 2 younger siblings. Pat was now first semester freshman. His grades in high school were slightly above average, but he explained that he had to ride the school bus for considerable periods of time because his home was 30 miles from the school. When he got home, he had to help his father, which left little time for studying. After further discussion that was not very productive because Pat's bravado and guarded comments, we agreed that he should write an autobiography of his life and include his perceptions of a career goal, his experiences at home, school, and work, and hobbies and interests. Okay, so for this one, you can see this type of personality and how it might fit well with the SIP model. Instructional modules that contain objectives, self-administered diagnostic tests, alternative learning activities, self-administered summary assessment. So you can see sort of this person is, very, very proud and is showing off a front. Okay, we want to know who it is. So by having him do things that are much more personal or personal based, like doing an autobiography, we're going to get through hopefully that layer of that front of his, the facade, so we can see who the true self is. Self-talk comments are viewed as self-efficacy beliefs, so both positive and negative statements are discussed with each client. So self-talk is like, I think I can do it, right? So for some people, that actually becomes a motivator. So it's really important to have that. It's not necessarily seen as a negative. So, but you want to pay attention as a counselor to your client's self-talk to see what they are doing to themselves and addressing it. All right, Model 5 is a multicultural career counseling model for ethnic women. Focuses on contextual elements of influence and recognizes salient racial factors that do not exist in previous models. So I just wanted to give you a definition of some of the keywords there because you might not know, which is context or contextual elements. So now we have to focus on the context of the situation or the environment of the situation that might influence a person's decision. Okay, so what is the context? You always want to hear about that when you hear about a situation. And also recognizes salient racial factors. There are race issues in America as well as everywhere else. Okay, we are a very diverse group, so there is a lot of racial issues that we see, unfortunately, in the news all the time. And they exist because they really do exist. We talk about it because they really do exist. Counselors need to remain alert and open to learning more about the needs of minorities and their worldview. So as a counselor, you need to be open to experiencing and understanding and seeing the world from your client's point of view. Contextual factors that limit career choice and stereotypes that hinder career development, and introduces counselors to racial identity as a significant variable in client-counselor relationship. So now we're going to have to really talk a little bit about race, okay? If you are of, let's say, a Latino counselor, and your client is Asian or African American, you're going to want to maybe discuss that if it becomes an issue. But it's always nice to make sure that your client's comfortable with it, because sometimes people who are a minority are very, very conscious of the racial differences between two people, especially one of power. All right, so the counseling timeline for this model would be, this is created by Bingham and Ward in the book, establish rapport and culturally appropriate relationships, identify career issues, assess impact of cultural variables, set counseling goals, make culturally appropriate counseling interventions, make decisions, and implement and follow up. So for this one, the book recommends you see Appendix C on page 416 to 418, which is the multicultural career counseling checklist for female clients. See Appendix D on pages 419 to 420, which is a career counseling checklist. That's something that you would give to your client. And then see Appendix E on pages 421, I'm sorry. And that's a decision tree. So I'm actually in the next slide, I'm going to show you 2 of the 3 portions of it. All right, so counselor readiness appendix, which is referencing the previous slide. This is the multicultural career counseling checklist for female clients. For you, you need to, this is just part 1 of several steps of the assessment. I want you guys to go through it and answer honestly when you guys have time to review it and see whether or not you are ready to do multicultural counseling. And then the decision tree, which is Appendix E, is kind of a flow chart, and it tells you kind of the flow of how people make decisions and stuff like that. Okay? All right. Establish rapport and culturally appropriate relationships. So the timeline that we had just talked about in the previous models, I didn't really go through all of them because those are typical processes, and they'll go into this one as well. But we want to now put into this section a viewpoint of someone who might be of a minority background, or maybe a female gender, because females and males do operate differently. Okay, so again, this is establish rapport and culturally appropriate relationships. Trust and collaboration are key components when the counselor and the client are from different ethnic backgrounds. Counselors should welcome a discussion of different worldviews by acknowledging racial differences. Invite the client to share feelings. I'll give you a quick example. I am of Asian descent, and I had a client who was from Mexico, directly from Mexico, not Mexican American, but from Mexico. And so his English was not very good. I'm going to be honest with that. And so when he came in, I said, oh, that's really interesting. Would you prefer to have a Spanish speaker do counseling with you? Because it seems as though English is your second language, and I want to make sure that there's no misunderstandings when we have a conversation. And he was very happy that I brought that up. He goes, actually, That's what someone else asked me already in the counseling office as well. But actually, I wanted to practice my English as well and understand English. So I wanted an English speaking person and not a Spanish speaking person. So there you go. And, just asking, throwing it all out there and seeing how he or she responds could actually build a better trust between the two, a collaboration between the two. All right, counselors should be aware of cultural cues, their nonverbal actions or body language, and reactions. So some cultures don't like eye contact, direct eye contact, and you need to gauge out and see what happens. If you have an Asian client and they're not staring at you, don't stare back at them the entire time during counseling. Occasionally give them an acknowledgement and look, but respect how they are doing their body language, how are they exhibiting their body language, and kind of mirror it or reflect it, because they might feel much more comfortable that way. Personal space is another issue. So, and then trust from a person of a minority background might take a while. It might take one whole session. It might take more than one whole session. So really be patient when it comes to a multicultural counseling relationship. All right, identify career issues. Ethnic minority clients who have experienced discrimination might feel they cannot overcome the barriers that have conditioned them to limit career choice. Cultural groups often share a common set of experiences of oppression that can collectively limit their perspectives of future opportunities. So you might say something like, for African Americans, the stereotype is that they'll never make it as a CEO or a high management level, right? So then they might not consider, if you have a client who's African American and they're like, they never talk about being the owner of a business or the head of a business because they don't feel like, because of racial discrimination and stuff, that they would ever achieve it. So they're not going to even think about that field or that area, that job, that dream. And that is quite sad if you think about it, right? So we want to discuss those things and say, maybe actually, you're a very bright person. Maybe you can be the CEO of your own business. Let's find out and see what your interests are and what your abilities are. Although some ethnic minority clients express confidence in their career decisions or directions, they should also realize that they have been influenced by various barriers in society. So something like an Asian person being stereotyped as being really good at math. So you see that they know that they want to become an accountant, let's say, right? And they can probably be very successful as an accountant, but maybe that's not really what they wanted to do. But because of the stereotype, because of the way that they were influenced by other people about Asians knowing or being very good at math, they're going to gear themselves towards that, realizing that they're not realizing that they're being pushed away from other types of careers that they could consider if they want to. Important part of this step is to identify experiences that limit career choices. Gender can also be limiting as well. We talked about this in the previous chapter when it comes to male and female. And what kind of jobs they are influenced to take from childhood. All right. Assessment impact of cultural variables. Counselors identify cultural variables that have the most limiting influence on career choice. Can be time consuming but very productive. Importance of how their family environment, religion, and cultural history have shaped their careers and their future. Influence from family among ethnic minorities, especially first generation ones, can be very extensive and inclusive. That means that some minority groups have really large families, extended families, okay? Not just mom, dad, siblings, but uncles and aunts and grandparents and stuff, so forth and so forth. Clients are often in conflict between what they want to pursue and what their families see as appropriate. And that's something that I see all the time when it comes to students who are now becoming vocational or career guidance counselors. Collective decision making among family members is considered more appropriate when it comes to this person who is more of a collective identity or has a collective identity. Set counseling goals. Goal setting is to be a collaborative negotiation between client and counselor. Some ethnic minority clients assume that they are to be passive participants, leaving all decisions to the counselor. Clients are reluctant to share their true feelings and experiences and are uncomfortable being actively involved in their entire career counseling process. Encouraging clients to negotiate activities throughout the counseling process will improve this feeling. Okay, so again, some of your clients will be passive. They're like, just tell me what to do. And you are there to help them learn how to negotiate and also make their own decisions as well. Ask them, are you good with this? So that they can agree. Because if they're not, or when they hesitate, you can bring that up and then have them talk more and explore more. Okay, pragmatic goals may be more appropriate for ethnic minority clients than self-actualization. We in Western culture really emphasize self-actualization, right? You're the individual trying to achieve all you want. But instead, let's look for more realistic goals that are seen or agreed upon by, let's say, a group of family members instead. All right, make culturally appropriate interventions. Some ethnic minorities need family approval and involvement in developing and delivering intervention strategies. It should not be considered unusual for some clients to seek family approval. Counselors should know who in the family are the decision makers. So if your client goes, I'm going to have to talk to my mom and dad, don't go, ugh, no, you don't. You're your own person. Respect that. But also, you want to explore and have them express their own ideas and stuff as well, and see if they are congruent with their family members and maybe why they are not, so that the client can feel more comfortable, even though the decisions might be opposite of what they really want, but their family wants it. Having an interpreter may be an appropriate intervention and can also facilitate groups. So if the person prefers or feel more comfortable in their native language, you might need to have an interpreter in there because that will facilitate some of the conversation and also the nuances of language, right? Sometimes we say things sarcastically as a joke or whatever, but in another language or a person who doesn't understand that might take it too seriously or interpret it too seriously and be offended. It is generally believed that group counseling is more effective when composed of the same racial group, biracial group, ethnic gender group, and community members. So they're saying in group counseling for this type, it might be beneficial to have everyone of the same position or place in society. It doesn't have to be always, but this is what they're saying that's generally believed. Counseling interventions may require several sessions because groups take more time to complete an agenda. So like I might ask one client to do this, and he or she may or may not do it by next week. Now imagine if you had 10 people in a group and you have the same assignment. You're not going to get them all done at the same time. So that's what it's saying, is to have some patience. Inventory or assessments must be appropriate for the client's racial or ethnic background. Again, when we talk about assessments or inventories, they were created often by white upper class men, educated men, and so their perception on what is going on might not necessarily be the same perceptions as someone who is African American, Asian, or Latinx. So we want to make sure that those tests are culturally competent or culturally sensitive, okay? So that they're not diagnosing the wrong thing. Okay, make a decision. Monitoring and decision-making process is important when clients are faced with multiple barriers. Some barriers are difficult to overcome, so some clients will make a decision mainly to please the counselor. So that means that maybe the client is just not ready to deal with some of these difficult situations, so they're going to just do whatever because they see the counselor as being so enthusiastic about it. So you need to again pay attention to body language, their tone of voice, and stuff like that to see whether or not they're actually being just complacent or just doing whatever because you want them to do it, as opposed to if they really truly want to do it, because they're not going to succeed if they're just following other people's ideas all the time. Again, recycle the model for the client is necessary. If they're not ready to go past that stage, go back to the previous stages to see where they are. Implement and follow up. So refer for information resources, individual contacts, or agencies for assistance. So this is the part where they interact and find their jobs. But then after a while, you also want to follow up and find out how they're doing. So you can give them a call and let them know, hey, if you're still struggling, you have a chance to return in the future and reuse the services again. Okay, never say this is the last time you'll ever see me, right? Because sometimes people fall and they need a little help to pick them up. Recommendations for multicultural career counseling process. The counselor should be aware of a variety of worldviews. The counselor's preparation for multicultural counseling is very important. This is why you're doing this and we're discussing it in education right now while you're in school. The counselor should fully understand his or her racial identity. The counselor-client relationship should be collaborative. Again, asking for agreement from your client. The role of the family in the decision-making and counseling process should be emphasized. Worldview, history of client, local sociopolitical issues, and stereotypes should be fully discussed. If it is something that bothers your client, or you're curious to see if it does, you can gauge it by asking these questions. The influence of racial or ethnic factors that limit career choices should be discussed. Non-traditional interventions such as talking in the client's native language, using interpreters, and involving community members who can offer insight and direction should be used. Client counselor process should be evaluated during counseling and after counseling is terminated. An extensive follow-up should be done, and the client should be invited to recycle if necessary. Even if it's another person inside your office who speaks their language. Let's say you don't speak Spanish as the counselor, your client does speak Spanish. Maybe another Spanish-speaking counselor comes in and says, this person is a really good person, as in referring to me, so you shouldn't be too nervous or weirded out by the fact that this person doesn't speak Spanish. And the last case is 3.5, the case study of the questionable future status. So let me read you a little bit about this person from the book. Carlos wanted to go to college but was unsure of his future status as a citizen. He came from the interior of Mexico at the age 8 to join his mother, who had left him for 1 year with his grandmother while she found a place for them to live in the United States. She married a U.S. citizen and has now established a home. For the first 2 years of school, Carlos was placed in a bilingual program. Once he learned the English language, he was able to make very good progress in school. He graduated from high school in the top quarter of his class and made mainly A's and B's on most of the subjects. His favorite subject was pre-calculus, and his least favorite was economics. He belonged to French and Spanish clubs as well as to a high school spirit club. Carlos reported that both Spanish and English are spoken in his home. He prefers English and uses it more than his mother does. He and his family belong to the Catholic Church. Carlos does not care to go to Mexico because, as he puts it, of the corruption there. The family celebrates the traditional holidays but relate more to respecting their ancestors on Halloween than is the custom here. Carlos is now 18 years of age and is working full-time at a company that specializes in mailing services. He claims to identify more as an American than a Mexican and plans to make his home permanently in this country. Carlos spoke excellent English and expressed himself very well. It was apparent that he had assimilated many of the dominant culture's social values, but he also had retained many values from his own culture. Carlos had asked for career counseling because he was not sure about his dream career and needed more information about it, and wanted to know which nearby universities offered degrees in photography or in how to produce and direct films. He told the counselor that he was interested in photography and the filmmaking industry because he had worked on some productions in his high school. He would very much like to become a film editor or a producer. The counselor told Carlos that he could be of help, but wanted to begin counseling with a career counseling checklist.